To round off our coverage of Learning Technologies 2024, we held a live debrief the day after the event, where I was joined by Katja and Kerry. We discuss everything that we heard and saw at the event, as well as what we think it means and what we did and didn't hear at the event that we wish we did. This is a recording of that session.
Hi everyone, and welcome. It's the day after Learning Technologies, a big day in our industry, and I think for everyone here, quite a long couple of days. We were just discussing how we're heading towards a recovery weekend, which is nice. So this is really our chance to debrief, go over the big conversations, the big topics, and kind of take the conversation forward a step to what that really means for us once we're out of the world of the Excel Centre and free coffees and notebooks and note pens and jumpers, which I'm sure we all came home with bundles of tucked under our arms. But it's not just me, you'll be phenomenally pleased to hear. I'm joined by two fantastic guests. So let's start with some introductions. Katja, can I hand over to you?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Well, I'm filling in for Katie, who is ill, but I will try to replace her very well. I'm an author on the book of Learning Ecosystems, so all about technology and strategy for corporates. And I will be publishing my new book in a couple of months, The Learning Mindset, which is more focused on the human side of learning, what is driving others' learning. So I'm actually very interested in both, and I was at Learning Technologies to speak with as many vendors as possible to challenge them on what they thought would be the future. And of course, I tried to attend some sessions as well at the conference, and it was a lot, but it was worth it.
Fantastic. And Kerry?
Hi, thanks, Tom. I'm Kerry Richardson. I'm an L&D consultant at Thames Water. Had the pleasure of working with Tom a few years ago. But yeah, I went to Learning Tech basically to see what was there, what we can use in Thames Water. It was my first experience, so a little overwhelming, but I took a lot away from it, and I'm excited to talk about that today.
Fantastic. So we are already joined by 54 people. So check that out. 2 days and you've not had enough yet. That's a good sign. So do jump into the comments. Let us know where you're joining from, what your experience at Learning Tech was, or if you couldn't make it. But let's open up the conversation with, I was going to start with a question about, so what was the big topic everyone was talking about? But I think we all kind of know what everyone was talking about. It was this kind of, new edge case, sort of no one's really been talking about it up until now, technology called artificial intelligence. So that was, of course, a big topic. But what were you hearing that was maybe different to what we've heard about AI previously?
Well, on my side, of course, a lot about AI. I was challenging people, of course, that I was talking to, like, can you please explain me what we're talking about with AI? So the big topic is actually generative AI. Make sure that we understand that. So I think people are less focused on it than, for example, in January. So I see it going down a little bit. I see also people are not worried anymore so much. Anxiety level is going down. It's more like, how can you use it now for performance support? So people finally see the difference, what it means for L&D. One of the sessions I was actually attending also spoke about the different kinds of AI. So yeah, I see that people trying to understand more what it is instead of like chasing, oh, I'm missing out on something. So that's the shift that I see going. But what mainly interested me is that, especially in the conference upstairs, the conversations were much more about how can we use AI to make it more human, to collaborate better, to share knowledge with people. So less the individual vision of AI, what can it do for me, but more what can it do for us as people and as organizations, and of course the ecosystem linked to it. So that's what I saw that is already changing.
That's really exciting. Kerry, what were your sort of takeaways around the AI conversation?
Very similar conversations really down in the exhibition of, I think where we were talking about AI earlier on in the year, it was it was, what are we going to do with it? We need to jump ahead of this. We need to know how we're going to use it. And I think actually, as L&D professionals, we've all taken a step back really and said, let's actually look at what it can do for us to collaborate together and actually focus on what it can do for the end user, really bring that content to life and that learning to life. It's not just something we need to get ahead of and make sure that we're doing immediately. So there were some really good conversations that I were hearing. There were people that were completely oblivious to the potentials. So they were having completely different conversations. And then there were people that were like Katja, really having those, I'm going to question a little bit more and I'm going to understand what you know so that I can get the best product, and I'm looking at what's out there. So yeah, it was really interesting. Definitely a different spectrum, but the same sort of conversations sound like it was happening at the conference and the exhibition.
I think there's something quite exciting about that, because it feels like we've gone through quite a quick maturing around AI in terms of our conversation. Because I confess to being a little bit worried, or having been a little bit worried over the last year, that we were still going to be stuck in the wow, isn't it exciting and cool stage, where we're still so blown away by the technology that we're maybe not making the best decisions. And that doesn't seem to be where we are, which is very exciting.
Yeah, it's maturing, and I want to comment on that. Something that I read yesterday from Donald Clark in his, I think he posted it also on LinkedIn. He said the best AI is actually the one that is invisible. We have been living with AI for so long. It was also in the opening keynote, for example. It's from the 80s, but even earlier than that. But we never talked about it. We don't know how much it is impacting our lives every day. Even here on LinkedIn, how did people got notified that we are doing this? Because an AI algorithm is telling them this might be interesting for you. That's also how we use it in LMS systems, in technology. This might be relevant for you. It's adaptive learning. So no, I never saw a buzz about that in TikTok, Netflix, but now with the generative AI, which is mimicking a human colleague, maybe somebody replacing our jobs and not making our jobs easier. I think that was actually what was terrifying for many people. And I think now they've grown into it very, very fast, because I think everybody realizes it's here to stay. And if you see what OpenAI is doing in the last months now, also with video, you just have to jump on it, accept it, go with it.
This is it. It's funny, I've been talking a lot recently about how actually AI doesn't want your job, but it's going to change your job. And I think especially when we talk about like content creation, I think there was an initial confusion around, oh great, quicker just means more content. And I kind of still feel that that's the worst possible outcome of content creation getting quicker. Content creation being quicker means, all those things that we never have time for, like being a great business partner and consulting with our business and coaching and mentoring, that need that human bit. That's what that time's for. And that's it's exciting to hear more people thinking that way about it, rather than just that fear element. Definitely. So I feel like we've hit the AI topic coming out of the gates really hard, but that was definitely not the only thing being discussed, which was really nice. It's always lovely to have a blend there. So after AI, Kerry, what was kind of something non-AI related that you heard people talking about or were engaging with?
So I sat and listened to a talk with Lidl and Learning Pool, where they were talking about blended learning. And again, it's another topic that I think you either get it right or you don't quite understand how blended learning really works. So for me, it was really important to hear that conversation. And it was the story that they told about how they'd actually developed it, how they were trying to bring the store to life, but also their return on investment from doing that was absolutely phenomenal. And what part of their story has stuck with me, which is 6 sticks. So it's about practicing it 6 times and it will stick with you. So yeah, I found that talk really interesting. It's something that we've been doing for quite a while, but we're still fine-tuning that, and not everybody is getting it right. So I think those conversations are still important. To let's perfect the basics before, to quote you, Tom, you find something shiny and brand new to go after.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back on content creation and build on that, because content creation, when you talk to L&D people, they think they are responsible to create the content. But many of the sessions and also the people on the floor that I was speaking, they realize that the best content or most relevant content can sometimes be in the head of your colleague who is more experienced, make more mistakes, and sharing this content, like collaborative learning, but from learning influences in your company, is something that I saw really popping up this time. And again, technology is helping for that. And I spoke at least 3-4 companies that say that they want to focus on more sharing of knowledge, unlocking the knowledge. One gave me an example that when we lose talent, we don't want to lose their knowledge. So they do these exit interviews where they actually capture on video everything that they think that they should leave within the company and then share it on the social channels of their LMS. And I think that makes me happy, because it's really about people and appreciating the knowledge within people. I wrote in my book about lean learning, and one of the things that is for me important is that we learn from somebody that we trust, that understands our business, our fears, the mistakes that we probably will make, and we can celebrate them together. So for me, social learning, collaboration within people is something that I'm very happy and excited, and hope that more vendors understand that it's not only about content creation. Well, it's not the vendors, it's actually the L&D people. They have to let go. People can also share. We don't need you only help them to create the content, maybe in a good way, but let them share their content. They're the experts.
I agree as well with that, Katja, because we were hearing conversations where it was actually, let's focus on the managers, what they can do for their people, but let's focus on our SMEs. They're the ones that hold the knowledge. At the end of the day, you can't expect an L&D person to know every single process, policy, everything that an SME would know. So let's bring them in on that journey. And I'm really passionate about learning in the flow of work. And the best way to do that is learning from your peers. I think that's so important. So it's great that you're hearing those same conversations as well.
Yeah, I think there are very interesting use cases that so for example, one of them is people leaving the company, but there were others too. I was talking to this one person and it was all about compliance training. And actually an expert was sharing on a channel like, this is the compliance training. This is what my takeaways were. And they started a discussion about it. And in the end, the feedback was brought back to the people in an L&D. They could then alter their course to what actually the users wanted it to be. And then content creation is with everyone. And there were so many great stories about sharing knowledge. So, but it's also the mentality, because L&D, and that was another talk, by the way, like L&D, they have their strategic place at the table with the executives. They want to show that, look, I'm worth it. Well, I think their place should be like, we understand the need of the people. We understand the business. Get out of your silos, work together with the people of marketing, learn together. And that, I think, can be a new role of L&D. They're connecting the people.
Totally agree.
It's interesting. So we've been kind of having very similar kind of talks, but I feel like in silos within our industry about how do we get out there and talk, because like getting out there and talking to learners and giving the learners the mic, as it were, to create, whether it's technically content or whether it's user generated stuff or whatever it might be, but getting them to contribute more to the learning experience is not new. But it feels like maybe during the kind of COVID panic that L&D went through, where we went, that's it, we've got to digitize everything. Everything's got to become an e-learning over a couple of weeks. So everyone went for Rise or whatever and just threw text and images in. It feels like now we've kind of got to walk some of that back, even now, a few years later, and not swing away from all things digital, but find a happier balance that acknowledges the importance of that human piece as well as the efficiency that technology can bring to that experience. And that's, I think, going to remain a tricky balance to find within each L&D team.
Yeah, Tom, I like what you're saying. I was actually listening at an event in Madrid to Donald Taylor earlier this year in February, and where he was presenting actually his survey. And of course, AI was top of mind of everybody. And social learning and collaboration got to the 4th place. And I was surprised. And I like numbers. And I was like, do we actually have less focus on the people, on the social and the collaborative learning? And I don't think it's like that. He called it a pandemic effect. We all wanted to reconnect in the pandemic. And then it went down. And I actually don't think it went down. It's still at the same level. There's just more people talking about AI. And I hope, I'm not sure because I can't prove it, I hope next year AI will go down and people will go up again. Today, I hope really next year we will talk about humans again.
I think that's interesting because I think it's that thing of whenever a technology is the most discussed thing, I think that's only ever going to be a temporary situation, right? Because every other technology we have, whether it's LMSs, LXPs, all the other authoring tools we've got, anything that we use is secondary to what we're trying to achieve. But I think at the minute, AI is such a universally impactful piece of technology to us that it's kind of almost stepping out of the technology and becoming a thing of its own. And we've now got to get it back to being a technology that we utilize, which I think once we do it, we'll suddenly become more comfortable because we won't need to have AI attached to every piece of branding. We won't need to go, is that an AI or is that a non-AI thing? No, it's just a really useful bit of kit for doing X, Y, and Z that's actually important to me in L&D, which would be a positive change.
But just thinking, Kerry, probably you see that because you're also at conferences. A couple of years ago, it was all VR, AR. Then 2 years ago, I was seeing metaverse. You just have to walk on the floor and you see, we have a metaverse. I didn't see metaverse on one single sign, but now it was AI. So every year I see something new, and it's what you say. It's like this. I'm not looking for the technology so much anymore, but what they can do to make a difference.
I agree. I only actually saw 2 VR stands, I think, from what I recall. I did have a go. It was really cool because it was a coaching conversation, which I found really interesting that you can use VR for that. But I wasn't getting bogged down with this is shiny and new for me. It was kind of like, actually, would that bit work in the business that I'm in? And how could we utilize that? But then walking around every other place with AI everywhere. And it was really about, for me, asking those questions. Well, what does it do? How is it going to benefit me? This is what I want. And I think that was really important as well, to ask the questions and say, this is about me. This is about the business I work for and what's important. And I'm hoping that other people did the same sort of thing and didn't sort of get lost in the messaging that each vendor was doing. They've got to sell their products, don't get me wrong, but it's about finding what's right for each person.
Yes, and it is not or, it is and.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not or VR or AI. And I see Jason Perry saying something. Yes, AI will be there. It will be embedded in everything. The thing is, when you talk about coaching, I heard a session about that as well. And you just have to think, if we do a VR experience and we get uncomfortable with the being comfortable, then we do things in VR that we don't think is possible. And I once, because I tried it as well, and the person moderating it afterwards, he came to me and he said, Katja, what were you thinking at the 10 seconds? What were you doing? And I was like, oh my God, I needed to think. Well, he was actually prompted by AI, because the AI said what Katja is doing there is not what you should be doing. It was very confronting for me. So that was for me a very, very nice example of bringing VR, being uncomfortable, with AI, understanding the data of what I was doing, and then a person bringing it all together and going into the discussion with me. So it's the end of everything. That's what I put learning ecosystems. How can we connect everything? Don't think about one system, but how they can actually augment each other and make everything better.
Yeah, it's complementing each other, because I tried the VR headset and my colleague actually did the coaching piece where it was monitoring sort of her facial expressions and things like that. And she did find that very confronting at the beginning, because she's quite a positive person. So to see that maybe she was a little bit off on something was a confronting experience, but she was getting the feedback and it's something that she can take away. So you're absolutely right. Having everything interconnected and communicating with each other, whether it's AI, VR, people, it's going to have the most benefit for the end user, the people at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I see somebody saying, what AI do you have? Being the first question. That is actually a very good thing. That's what Marcus Bernard said as well. When you go back down to the conference, go into a discussion with the vendors, and when they say we have AI, ask them, what is AI doing? What is the data that you're doing? Why do we need AI? Because there are so many different conversations going around. We actually started with it. Is it about generative AI? Is it about AI to understand people behavior? Whatever. So it is indeed a very good question. What AI do we have? What are we talking about, actually?
Absolutely. Really good actually comment coming in here. As I work in learning analytics, while I use machine learning a lot, I'm still waiting for an AI. It's like the black box, which prevents us from understanding why something is happening or why a learning pathway isn't effective. And that's really interesting. That at the minute we're still at that point where it's kind of like, oh, the AI is doing things, stuff. It's like magic. That's really concerning language, I think, to a lot of us. It's like we do actually want to know how we got from A to B to C. That's really important for us to help the human that we're going to be offering some feedback to. Maybe not to the point where we understand like exactly how the AI did it, but just where the AI went, just the roadmap that they can show us after the fact, right?
Yeah, that was exactly what somebody said in the conference too. AI is not magic. It's just software. It's just an algorithm actually built by humans.
I think that's the thing to remember whenever we get into a thing where we get a bit worried as well, is that we've got to remember that actually we built this thing. But as much as it might seem all self-intelligent and scary, actually it's ours. We created it. It's the same in that sense. It's the same as every other technology. Is somewhere there is a human.
Yeah, that I don't know if you went to the second day opening keynotes. It was actually from Timon de Jong, and he was talking about well-being and that we never had so many people being scared, and apparently especially the younger and the older people from my generation, which are like somewhere in between. We're not that scared, apparently, that I found funny. But he explained something with an elevator, and that when we first needed to use an elevator, people were scared to go into the elevator. So they actually, and he made a very funny exercise about it. So you can call somebody, have a stop button. You have a lot of things in the elevator to make it more comfortable, even a mirror, apparently, but also a stop button. And he related that to the fear of people today. Can we still push the stop button of AI? And why do we need to have this control? What is it actually that is driving us like a little bit like, oh, I'm scared? So that I found a very good keynote.
The fear comes from the unknown, though. If somebody doesn't understand it, then you're automatically going to have a fear. But I think what we're saying as well is, because we don't understand it, that's because we're still scratching the surface of it. What can AI do? And what do people have? What can it do for us in our roles? And I just think that's the biggest questions at the moment. And where we're scratching that surface, we'll get those answers. But it's the unknown. That is the conversations that I'm hearing, not just in my business, but from a few other people, is I'm scared of it because I don't know what it's doing or why it's doing it.
Oh, go on, Katja, because I've got a topic that I want to bring up, but let's.
Just one last thing on what Kerry said. It is indeed what can we do with it, but also the fear of missing out. Mm-hmm. Oh, all the rest is using it, and I don't know what to do with it, so I'm gonna lag behind on the rest. So that's the other fear, I think.
Absolutely.
We're about halfway through the session, and there's a topic that I really want to bring up because I felt it was a missing topic in some regards, and that is accessibility. Not just accessibility of e-learning, but just in general, the accessibility conversation. There was one seminar focused on accessibility out of 200 and some odd. And I had 3 conversations, very passionate conversations, but 3 conversations out of hundreds about accessibility. So the first thing was, I'd love to hear what the 2 of you saw and heard at Learning Tech about it. And then I just want to touch on why you think that of all the topics, because to me right now, it's a huge topic. New technology, it becomes the obvious second thing around great new stuff's being created. How does it align with this? And how do we make it accessible? That kind of thing. What were you hearing, or were you not hearing anything about accessibility at the event?
I had one vendor that spoke openly about accessibility with me, and actually opened up that conversation. I didn't need to prompt. Other than that, I can't say I heard a lot about accessibility. It seemed to drop off the radar, and yet it's something with me that's really important to me and Thames Water. We're making sure that everything is accessible and we've got that equitable learning.
I am really scratching my brain now. I don't think I had any conversation about it, like really as a topic.
Yeah.
Which is actually surprising indeed, because it should be one of the key topics. So actually, Tom, I'm now curious on what your findings were.
Yeah, so I mean, I cheated a little bit. I knew I was going to get one conversation because I got there and beelined for Susie Miller at EllaHub, because that's always just the best way to start any conference. If Susie's there, go and have a chat about accessibility. It helped that she bought Braille Lego, so you could learn to spell out your name in Braille in Lego. That was great. And she's sort of talking about the second edition of her book, that kind of thing. But again, an individual that's hyper passionate about accessibility. Then Gemma Nunn, who's the head of learning design at Mint Interactive, her seminar was a real practical deep dive into, how to get hands-on and practically create content and retrofit content to make it more accessible if you're dealing with content where this wasn't considered in the past. I had a phenomenal conversation with one of Arlo's partners about how they utilize and train facilitators from people with lived experience of things like addiction and homelessness to create a really kind of equitable experience, so that if you're training people or offering training courses to people who were themselves homeless, the facilitator has a similar lived experience that they can really relate and empathize with the group on. But that was kind of it. Which really, I would agree, it really surprised me, because in previous years, it's never been the topic of conversation, which is probably, you could argue that either way, but it's always been significant. But yeah, I really noticed that maybe it's the size of the AI conversation, maybe it's how how many different things are changing all at once. But I do get a little bit concerned at times that it's being not forgotten, but minimized, as it were. The window's still open on the desktop, but it's over in the corner somewhere over here, where it should probably be more of a widget in everything else that we're doing, which is just probably not a great way to describe it, but that's the best I could do off the cuff.
Well, as I was thinking, it was like, yes, there was one question. There was one question after the opening keynote from a young lady. She actually touched on this point. One question, and when I say I forgot the answer of the keynote speaker, that's probably because it didn't make such an impact and didn't address really the question. But the question was indeed, how can AI help us with accessibility? Again, it went back to the AI because most of the conversations were still back. I was myself discussing something when I was asking a vendor what he thought about learner personas. So how he could, because they say our solution is a fit for everyone. Don't ever do that when I come to your stand. Never. That's the same as saying I don't have competition. So I was trying to get the words out, I think, from people to say how they could approach different groups of people. It's like I'm always saying, I can reach my grandmother on Facebook, one daughter on Snapchat, and the other one on Instagram, because they are very neurodiverse, all of them. And indeed, that's also accessibility. It's how can you reach people that are different in so many ways. But indeed, next time when you see me coming on your booth, that will be one of the tough questions that I will be asking.
Excellent. That was. I'm always glad to hear when people say that, because that was the topic of my seminar. Was give vendors a tough time. I say that as someone who works for a vendor. So you're welcome, colleagues. It's my fault. But no, we should ask really difficult questions, because that's how we know we're getting the information we need to make informed decisions, right? And how we
Not
know
only
whether or not the
that,
vendor really gets it.
I think we help them, because if they don't get the tough questions, and they don't get, I told you about the silos, if they don't bring the tough questions back to their management teams, to the roadmap to develop their product, then these products, they will stay like this. I tell you, I didn't saw almost none of the vendors upstairs in the conference to see what is actually the driving what we need to build. So also, though they stayed both in their silos, they should collaborate more. So we need to ask them tough questions. We need to bring them together.
So I feel like I'm glad we got to that. I was worried you might have to. I didn't want to miss the topic again, as it wasn't there at conference. So I want to touch on what we kind of discussed earlier around the importance of that human piece, and what you saw around whether it's vendors, whether it's people talking about their experiences about how technology, whether it's AI or not, can help bring people together and help those good conversations happen. Because I think that silo piece is very true in that arena, in my view, that we often view technology and the human part as very separate. And that's a little bit risky. Kerry, I'd love to kind of hear if you saw or have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I actually went to a talk on the first day, and I found it really useful because they talked about what kind of learning do you deliver? Is it in person? Is it hybrid? Or is it remote? I was one of two people that put my hand up for in person. The rest of the audience was split very much between hybrid learning and remote learning, which I found very interesting. But again, there was a lot of questions around, well, what does that mean? And actually, how do you get everybody to interact, especially with the hybrid? You've got half of your population sat face to face and half of them at home. How are they getting the same learning? Because at the end of the day, you do naturally tend to, I've got people right in front of me, I have to face them, I have to talk to them, I have to make sure that they're okay, and you forget the people that are actually on the screen. Well, they're just as important. So there should be that, again, equitable learning and experience for them. So I really took a lot away from that talk, really. One, because we've got the opportunity that we can look at different ways of learning and not just being in person, and actually making that easier for people who have different life experiences, have different lifestyles, etc., and really accommodating everybody. But not only that, making sure that we're paying attention to everybody, whether they're in the room or not. Everybody should get the same experience to a certain extent.
Katja, what about yourself? Any kind of differing or similar views?
Well, with the new book coming up, Learning Mindset, I've did a lot of research. What is actually learning? And why should we learn? And why are we not learning? And people all learn for different reasons, most of it unconsciously. So I don't care so much about whether it's live or with technology, but it is capturing actually did something change. And I know it's very difficult to do learning analytics, correlation, causability, why are we learning? I think one of the challenges for the future is to accommodate everybody in their own learning. And I don't believe in learning styles. Don't take me wrong. I think with technology, we can touch the people where we want to touch them. To give you an idea, some people are very introvert. When you put them in a training room, they're overwhelmed. They suffer imposter syndrome. So they will not engage actively in the conversations. But if you will have them also, like here in the webinar, they will be reading, listening, and maybe they will engage in a question, because actually the screen gives them some kind of comfort. So I'm talking again about neurodiversity, and I think with technology we can get there. So for me, if they would ask me, what do you think is better? Is it a hybrid learning or a live event or whatever? I think with learning ecosystems, so using as much as possible technologies to reach as much as possible different learners in our ecosystem. And if we can then manage to actually track collaboration and what they learned, I think that's a nice opportunity.
I love that when you were talking about your new book that's coming out, you said, what is learning? And I think that was a question that was coming up a lot as well, that I heard in conversations about what is learning? How do we define it? What do other people, what's their view on it? So I think it's a really, really great question. So I'm going to look out for your book and see what you've written.
The thing is, this morning somebody said, we're in the training business. I said, do you work with dogs? Because my father in the 70s was already an L&D person. And when I was a child, I thought he worked with dogs. And that's why I'm fascinated by what is learning and what is training. And I had a discussion with a salesperson on the booth, and I challenged them as well. Are you in the learning or the training business? Again, I'm not nice when I come to your booth, but I always have fun. So, and they said, for me, compliance, training, social learning. This was a girl, I don't think she's older than 19 or 20, but I got what she was saying. Some things we need to train just over and over, repetition, repetition, repetition. But it's not changing our behavior. And I think for me, learning is also changing our behavior, our mindset, learning mindset, to actively want to know more, to release the dopamines in our head, to be happy. Yes, I achieved something. I never heard somebody saying after a compliance training, yes, it is life-changing for me.
It touches on a really interesting point, actually, because for those who don't know, Lauren Waldman was at the Learning Technologies Conference and was talking in the Moodle Cafe a lot about how we need to kind of up our game when it comes to really understanding the biological processes involved in learning and what that means for our people, and how, when we talk about, the emotional stakes of learning and engagement, that kind of thing, what's really going on behind those kind of surface level terms. And I think she highlighted something really important in that, as L&D professionals, we often kind of learn, you do this and you do that and you do that. Why? Oh, because that's how the brain works. As a catch-all term for don't worry, there's a sciencey bit going on you don't need to understand. That's a bit dangerous. It's a bit like a mechanic going, oh yeah, that's where the engine-y bit is. That makes the car move, but don't worry about that bit.
Well, and I'm so sorry, but that's a lie, because everybody's brain is wired different. I love what Richard Branson is doing with dyslexic people, the way that dyslexic people think very holistically, and they look at every problem, when we talk about problem solving, very different. That's why I love neurodiverse teams, because I call it in my book a league of extraordinary learners. Put them together, give them a challenge, and they will succeed because they all learn and look at the problem with their mind, with their brains, which is not wired identically.
This is it, and I feel like as long as we kind of, and I think Nicola's right there, it's that black box issue again, right? It's AI or it's the brain, as if it's one thing for everyone. But until we start to get that deeper understanding of that stuff, again, accessibility, that issue again, we can't really get serious about that while we're still thinking, everyone thinks the same. Everyone's brain functions the same. As someone who is dyslexic, I can tell you, when you look at a page of text and when I look at a page of text, we do not see the same thing. I see something utterly terrifying. It's a really interesting conversation that I think Lauren just really highlighted was not being had enough. but not just at the conference this time, but more just in standards within our industry. We tend to be very focused on the functional of today and less on that kind of, again, the human bit. Fantastic. So we've got a lot of people in, a lot of comments coming in as well. Quite a few on AI, so we shan't go back too far on those, but we are going to open things up to a Q&A in another few minutes. So if you've got questions, thoughts that you'd like to test, or just anything you'd like to ask anyone on the panel, start dropping them into the comments. And in the meantime, as a kind of last formal question, if you will, I'd like to ask each of our panelists what's kind of their main sort of call to action was at the end of the event. Katja, is it okay with you? We start with you.
Well, I actually did a bet with some people. What will be the hot topic next year? And well, maybe I'm driving already the conversation a little bit that way, but I hope it will be human. And after this talk, I will add some stuff to it. Human accessibility. We're all different. Treat us as humans again, not as a number. So I hope that's what's staying now with me.
Brilliant. And Kerry, your takeaway.
My call to action is always going to be very different because of the industry that I work in, and we've got our challenges. So actually mine's about fixing the basics and making sure that we have the right tools, again, to quote you, Tom, the right tech stack, that we can provide the right service to our people. So they're getting the learning. It's easy, it's accessible, it's relevant to what they're doing. And that's always so important to me. And I've had a good chat with some people. I've definitely got some thinking to go with it. But I would agree with Katja. I'd really love to hear more conversations about the human aspect going forward. So I'm on board for that next year.
And just to wrap up, for me, I think we all landed in very similar places, which is quite interesting considering how varied the event was. For me, there has never been a more important time to engage with a network of L&D professionals, whether that's a formal network or just your connections on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. There's so much going on. There's so much noise in the space. Being able to do this with two fantastic industry colleagues and kind of hear, am I hearing what they're hearing? How are we interpreting things differently? There's never been more value in that. So I'd encourage everyone to do that. I know I certainly will be. But with that, I'd like to turn over the lead of the conversation to the chat. A couple of comments around yet. Someone attended Lauren's impromptu chat in the Moodle Cafe, which is brilliant. This is an interesting one, I guess, just picking up on what we're talking about the human stuff. So people like labels and buckets versus seeing people as individuals.
I like to comment on that one.
Go for it.
Because with the research I was doing for the new book, we're actually labeling children as from a very, very young age, saying he's slow, she is different. And we as parents, we're actually doing this unconsciously, but it is like this backpack that young children take with us. And I've seen 17,000 children, by the way, with my non-for-profit work, where I visit schools around the globe to see what children actually think. And we're labeling too fast. The thing is, even it is not a formal label, it is done by a parent or a school teacher. There is such thing as self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, I will never achieve. Where I see more and more young people entering the corporate world, still carrying this backpackage. I think it's our human responsibility as a parent, as a manager, to stop labeling.
I think that's a very positive message, but I think it's quite literally difficult to do, isn't it? Because even then, sort of like I put myself into that bucket of dyslexic people, but it's definitely not one bucket, and I know that because within my it's funny because I literally wrote an article about this the other week about how both me and my brother are dyslexic, but we have a very different experience of that in that he was diagnosed as a child and I was not. So I was in the group of, you're just not trying hard enough, you will learn to read. I'm actually quite glad that that was my situation, because for him it was, here's an excuse for teachers not to try very hard. And I'm not saying that's the current state of teaching. This was quite some time ago. But, you know, there are very different experiences. The same as some people will go, it's my superpower. For me, that's not my personal feeling towards the experience that I've had. But that's okay. We're allowed to disagree. We're not a homogenized group that has to agree on everything. But collectively, it tends to be dyslexic people need the following things. It's like, it's not quite that simple. But even I, as someone in the group, fall into it. Sure, this would be a marvelous comment. The human brain likes to categorize everything in its path. It's the easy thing to do, but it's good to challenge this, as each bucket comes with many assumptions, often wrong. So Helen and Katja, this is a conversation needs broader airing. Absolutely. And maybe that's the thing is, in the space right now, where are these conversations happening? Do we know anywhere that's really having these conversations well, where we can direct people?
Well, that's actually the topic of my new book coming out, addressing all the neurodiversity and embracing everything what makes you as a human special to become a learning influencer with all the things that you can bring. Forget about the emotions of the past. And I think a big role for L&D is there to understand, when you onboard people, what is the back package that they're carrying, and how can we use this neurodiversity actually as something that they can actually add to the team. And I really like the conversation as well. By the way, I'm also dyslexic, and I've written 4 books, so it can't be an excuse.
Absolutely. And this goes on, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its whole life believing it's stupid. Einstein, I like that. That's brilliant. So I wonder maybe if there's, because I think if there's anything you do want to ask in the chat, we've got a few more minutes that we can do. So please do get your questions in there. I kind of want to pick up on kind of the thing that ties together everything we've been talking about. We've had kind of the AI piece, this accessibility stuff, the groupings of people, how we blend different content types together. But at the minute, it kind of feels like we're having separate conversations about these things. Have either of you yet seen any working or starting to work attempts to bring these things together? Because ultimately, this is all about the experience of a learner and the impact that experience has on them and the wider organization. So how do we start moving from these separated conversations to this all being part of the same conversation, the same process?
I really love your question. One of the things that I hate is silos. I think we should break down the walls, as I like to say. I have guided some companies in starting this conversation, where we have workshops about what is actually driving the problems that we see, but don't name them as problems anymore, but start seeing them as opportunities for growth, and use the collaborative knowledge that we have from all the different departments, add some young people to the group, add maybe somebody who is leaving the company very soon to the group, and start the conversation, talk to each other. Because what I see often is that we all address a problem or an obstacle from our view. And when we really go like to the root cause of what is driving this, then we can start the conversation and build on something new. So it's all about talking to each other again, understanding our different points of view.
Fantastic. And Kerry, what about yourself?
I think I have to agree, really. It's that collaboration piece. And it was something, when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today, and if there was anything that I specifically had on my mind that I wanted to chat to you guys about, I actually wrote collaboration as my first key thing, because being my first experience as well of going to learning tech, it was so nice seeing people that I hadn't seen for a few years, connections on LinkedIn, that it's kind of odd when you see people for the first time not off their LinkedIn profile, and I'm like, I think I know you. but actually having those conversations was so refreshing for me, because it's easy to stay, as you said, siloed in my industry, and this is what I do, and I've got my people that I speak to, and yes, I do go out to other water companies, but actually hearing from other people in different industries and getting their perspectives and how all of this fits together is absolutely refreshing. It fully starts with that for me.
And I want to elaborate on that. What I saw this time is that what I call openness, the real human competence to be critical, but open to other people's opinion. What I saw in this conference is all the conversations, they were very open, listening to each other. There was not like, this is right or this is wrong. I felt that the atmosphere was really open in what can we use, what can we learn, what can we share. And indeed, I hope these conversations keep going on LinkedIn, but because I had the same experience, so many people that I know from LinkedIn, and I went like, is this really you? I thought actually he was taller or shorter, but it opened up. And that's why I think conferences like this are good, because with some, I really want to keep having the conversation that we started at the conference.
Definitely. And I think the kind of that's what this session has actually been all about for me, is to make sure we translate those fantastic conversations that we always have at conferences back into the real world when we hit back at the office and we've all got, you know, a task list waiting for us, or emails that we missed, or pressures at home, or no, I'm going on holiday next week, so I've got none of that. But yeah, that's another way in which I'm going to start forgetting everything that I discussed and got really excited about this week. So I think I would love for everyone who's listening and watching today, for this to be the start of a conversation you now have back in your teams. We're very good sometimes at conferences or webinars to get very involved, but then things disappear when we hit back into work. So please, in the next couple of days, I know it's Friday, so Monday, Tuesday of next week, have a related conversation with just one other person in your office. I guarantee you, just doing that once will start the snowball rolling, because they will want to have that conversation with you again, or with someone else that they know. And before you know, it will become a regular staple of what people do in your office. And with that, we've got a few questions that have come in actually. Nate's asked the question, are we, with learning tech vendors, are we seeing what we see with other tech apps, which is and I shan't say that word because otherwise the video got taken off, will get taken off. Basically, are we seeing declining quality in order to generate more money? I'm just going to jump on this because I have a kind of pre-existing opinion, which is not universally. Because I agree that in tech in general, this is a problem. But actually, I think in L&D, we are somewhat lucky in some senses that a certain number of vendors, and it's not universal because nothing in life is truly universal, right? But a lot of vendors are started by incredibly passionate L&D professionals. And those are the ones, I think you can spot them. You can always spot them because they are, as much as any vendor can, holding really true to what's important to learning. They are really trying to make a difference. The flip side of that is there are those who, yeah, absolutely are going down the same road, because we often hear, oh, a big tech company's had success, we should follow, as if it's a universally correct thing, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is this week that's kind of the new exciting thing. We often chase it without considering, yes, it's popular, but does it actually help our use case? So that would be my initial response on this. Any other thoughts from the panel?
I agree.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I agree. And I want to actually answer one of the questions from Shannon Davis.
Brilliant.
And I want to ask everybody to answer on this one. First of all, we can already follow you. What I will do to start this conversation, I will make a post probably on Monday with everything that I thought was very interesting, which is not about tech, but it's about people. So I will tag a lot of people that I think are worth following, that actually inspired me. So if we then start following each other and you can do the same, then I think we can grow our network like this and start learning collaboratively.
I think that's the kind of thing that's super exciting and super helpful to do as well, right? To share those people that got us to where we were today. Kerry, yourself.
So to tackle both questions, I think going back to what you said, Tom, your seminar basically covered that topic anyway, of you are going to have some vendors that, yeah, they might not have the best product or it's very similar to another one, but I found that asking them the right questions for me was determining how good was their product for me, not necessarily for somebody else. And I think that's what you need to continue doing, because there are a lot of similar products. So what's different? What makes them different? And it's generally about the company, because of their passion behind their product, who they are as people, and whether they want to build that really great relationship. And then on the topic of building up networks, I think, Katja, that's a great idea. And the best way to build our network and continue this conversation as well, which I think is super important.
Brilliant. We've got one other question that I thought actually it's an AI related question, but I think it's worth asking. As fellow neurodivergent, I'd like to ask two of you that have claimed dyslexia, how has AI helped you?
Oh, I love the question. I'm not native English, as you can probably hear, but I write my books in English. With Kogan Page, I publish in London and in New York. I love DeepL. I use it for so long. I couldn't write without AI. I use Grammarly. I use all those tools to help me. So if you write me in my own language, in Dutch, where I sometimes forget to use AI to help me to write, then you will see that it's really awful what I write. That's why I write in English. But there are also other tools when I'm doing my research. I use things like Research Rabbits to go to academic papers, and it's very easy to scan for me and to highlight what's most important. It helps me to speed up the process of my research, to get to really the points that I like to find research on. I think that's one of the benefits of AI. That's maybe why I only start writing a lot right now, because I have to admit, too afraid, because everybody told me, you shouldn't write, you can talk, but you can't write. And AI give me the confidence that I have my personal buddy coaching and helping me.
And for me, it's very, very similar. So I use a lot of voice to text stuff, and that has got phenomenally better as AI has improved, in that now it can pretty 95% be writing what I'm saying, which is a huge help just in terms of getting thoughts down. One thing whenever I try to write, the biggest challenge is not actually the writing, it's the fact that the writing is a lot slower than the thinking. And that disconnect makes it very difficult to write like sensible sentences. I'll go, hang on, I've missed like the 3/4 of the middle of that sentence because I've thought ahead too much. So it's really helpful to be able to capture at the pace that I need to go at, even if I need to, do a few editing passes, which is no bad thing in and of itself.
When writing, I have a very funny tip here. I sometimes translate what I was typing to another language and then translate it back. And when I forget words and parts of sentences, that what I get back in my own language is like, okay, I have to start over again. I was not making any sense.
Brilliant. Well, I really wanted to hit that one at the end because I thought it was just such a good question. But
I think it's really nice, just very quickly, because I know we are coming to the end. But I think it's really nice that actually you're talking about AI and how it can support you and help you. And I think that's the important conversation about AI. It's not that it's something scary. It's what can it do to help?
Definitely. So we've got two really important things to do at the end of this call. The first is for me to say thank you so much to both of our panelists, because after all that is learning tech, doing a webinar the very next day is a big ask. So I really appreciate your time. But also, if people want to get hold of you, where's the best place to connect with yourselves?
LinkedIn.
Fantastic. That's super easy. Links to both LinkedIn profiles are below this live stream. But the last thing we need to do is announce the winner of our competition from LearnTech. So people were able to register their names, and the winner will be receiving a free AI avatar created of themselves, your own personal AI clone, and a year's free subscription to our enterprise package. So without further ado, let's spin the wheel. Paul, congratulations. We will be in touch with you in the very near future to discuss setting up your prize. But with that, that brings us to the end. Again, thank you so much to both of our panelists. You've been amazing. Thank you to everyone in the audience. I think at one point we had like 96 people with us the day after LearnTech. That's phenomenal. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was helpful, and we shall see you in another live stream in the very near future.
With that, our coverage of Learning Technologies 2024 is complete. The key takeaways: AI is here, it's here to stay, and it's something we need to get used to. There's no going back to business as usual. Change is the new constant, and things are only going to change quicker in the future. Despite all of this and all the new technologies that we're getting our hands on, the human element remains key. Learning is inherently a human process, and so people must be at the very core of our learning strategies. We hope our coverage of Learning Technologies 2024 has been helpful to you, and we hope to see you at an upcoming event.